Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session
with your host, Michael Rearden.
Welcome, Jesse Hartman, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks so much for coming on. Today, we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, and that's going to be education. If you're familiar with me, the podcast, if your audience, of course, they know me. I was an educator myself, K-12 music and the special ed. And I just love speaking to other educators, and the work that you do with tutoring and education is going to be paramount to what we need today, because we can look at inner city to cities that have more resources for their children. Tutoring is always going to be something that can be a benefit to a child, to even an adult. Learning never stops. It never quits. So we have to give ourselves that mindset of being continuous and forever learners. So we're going to have a fun conversation today talking about your work tutoring, your company, education, and all. But before we do that, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
Sure. And thank you so much for having me. I couldn't agree more with everything that you just said. So who I am, what I do. My name is Jesse. I am a 43-year-old fella. I run a tutoring company and I tutor and work with kids. I've been doing that my entire adult life. So coming up on almost 21 years. I work on all sorts of different things with all sorts of different kids. The company spans quite a range, and I myself specialize in older students, but I work with second, third, fourth, fifth graders if the call is there. We do a lot of enrichment, a lot of test prep, plenty of executive functioning coaching, critical thinking coaching. Really, the goal is to make sure that we're not just helping a kid with their homework or prepare for a particular test, that we're really supplying them with sustainable, transferable skills and mindsets that can be applied in a host of areas. We really aim to make sure that the families are comfortable. We don't just work with the child, we work with the whole family as much as we're able to. And it's not just about that one particular call that was really maybe the impetus for the parent picking up the phone, but more so about really trying to look at the kid holistically and provide them with as much of a balanced framework for their future and to help them reach their potential in general as we can.
Mm-hmm. You say that you work with older kids. When does that age stop? Is it high school? Is it college? Because I can look back at my college days and most of my professors were older. And I'm talking about like 50, 60. They were up there in age and they were really good professors. I'm not, throwing them under the bus because they're older, but they saw us as kids. It was, even though I was 18, even going up to 21, I was still a kid to them, even though according to America, I was an adult. So if I did something wrong, I'm tried as an adult. I'm not a juvenile or anything. So what is that age group for the older kids, you say?
Right. That's a great point. So I work predominantly with 7th, 8th grade up to 11th, 12th. There are times when I help kids who are not actually children. So I've worked with a lot of GRE students, people trying to get into grad school. And for me, I agree with you that it's kind of this indistinguishable notion of child, we got it. But young adult, that can kind of go up to maybe like 28, 29. And as I've gotten older, the breadth of that has definitely increased. Now I find myself talking to like a 30-year-old and I'm like, oh, look at you. How adorable. You were born in like 1995. So it's an ever-changing process in terms of our perspective. But just in terms of the academic experience, 7th grade through 11th, 12th is usually how I envision the notion of older kids. And that is what I seem to get the most calls for personally. But the company, we do, 2nd, 3rd grade all the way up.
Of course. I just want some clarification so people, they know who they're calling, like who they're going to reach out to, because they're like, well, my kid is 9. Is he older, younger? And I think it's challenging for a parent because as a parent, you don't necessarily see your child as more, like as an adult until like they're gone out of the house and they're, maybe have their own family, things along those lines. It's something that I don't think we pay attention to. It was a wonderful quote. Basically, you don't know when is the last time you're going to pick up your kid or something, or like the last time you held your child, because always that child is replaced with someone new. So I remember I have young kids. And when he was a baby, newborn, I was like, he's pretty cool, right? He's chill. And then he started to walk and do all the things. He looks a little bit different. And I was like, I kind of like the old, the old version of you better. But then I kind of forgot about the old version and I like the new version. And then, now he's in the terrible 2s and 3s. And I'm like, I think I like the old version more. And then I'm acclimating to the new version. So, as time goes, we just always see them as our child, our kid. And I think we want the best for them. Most parents want the best for their children. And, studies show that parents will spend more money on their children than they would on themselves. So education is going to be one of those things that they're looking at. And many parents today are leaving the public school system because there are so many holes in the public school system. There's so many problems that parents have really got a chance to see from the pandemic, and it was just exasperated from the remote learning and things along those lines. They say, this is not it. So many parents started to make a wave to homeschool their children. And parents, unfortunately, are not educators. So they have to figure out, well, how can I educate my child? And that is basically where I would like to start the conversation with you today is if parents are not going to be the person who knows how to work through the different developmental stages of a child and understand the teaching methods that they have to apply to them for them to get the maximum or for them to maximize their learning, we need to get someone else in the picture. Now, I'm not saying that mom and dad can't also be working on their ABCs, 1, 2, 3s when they're younger, and then all the way up to algebra and 6th grade and stuff like that. But I'm saying we have to be able to supplement. And, what is your process for that?
Great question. So I've joked with parents in the past that I could change the name of my company to "We're Not Your Parents," because very often all that it really requires is an authority figure who knows some stuff who's just not the kid's parent to really reach them. And it's unfortunate because a lot of these parents are very patient, very knowledgeable. They do have a great understanding of how to deliver a message, how to communicate. But the hang up is they're the kid's parent and the kid doesn't want to hear it. They don't want to be instructed by their parents. And I understand that. Especially as the child becomes a teenager or even a preteen, there's an inherent vision for an adolescent to separate themselves from their parents that is biological and neurological and really should be fostered, not fought against. So it's understandable that the child wouldn't want to also be their parent's student. But there is a natural inclination for the parent to want to be the one who's really raising the kid in every way possible. And as you're saying, a lot of parents became privy to what goes on in the educational world during COVID with online learning when suddenly they could just watch what was happening. And a lot of parents were a little surprised, disappointed, frustrated, and appalled. A lot of them. Children were uprooted and pods were created and small, almost early 1900s style schoolhouse environments started springing up. And I feel like the challenge for most educators in those environments is that they don't know who they're supposed to be catering their message to. Is it the child in front of them who is the student? Is it the parent who very often is the client or the customer or the person who's really paying or asking for these services? Is it society that they're attempting to usher the child into? So they should be trying to maybe conform this kid to fit into their community or their district or their state or their country? Or is it their own vision of what they think a good person should become and try to mold the kid into that? There's a lot of different directions that educators kind of feel pulled and pushed towards. And this will be confusing and often will cause internal conflicts for the educator and confusion for the student because it's not uniform, it's not consistent, and consequently, it's not impactful or helpful. So I would say the number one goal is to stay attuned to the child who's in front of you. And that's not an easy thing to do, but I do believe that it would be beneficial for educators to think about that as a necessary skill for teaching. It's not just about knowing the content and being able to communicate it. It's about being able to understand the recipient of that message and make the plane that you're flying land smoothly. That's your job also, not just to fly the plane, but to land the plane. And being attuned to a child, that doesn't just mean, oh, I know fifth graders or I know math. And it doesn't even mean I know Matthew, because Matthew is going to change over the span of a few weeks, maybe even over the span of a few hours. And so being able to read a child and recognize what needs they have in the moment, where they're thriving, where they're frustrated, how far you can push when you need to pull back, and to find that sweet spot where you're still challenging the student, but you're not overdoing it and you're not making them feel uncomfortable to the point where they're going to shut down. These are really difficult things to do with a group setting. I'm very lucky And I feel incredibly fortunate that I have a one-on-one educational experience where I get to cater my message to the one child in front of me. I've never been a classroom teacher myself. I don't envy them. I am very impressed by classroom teachers. The behavioral issues alone is enough to make you go crazy. But the notion of attempting to really reach this wide spectrum of kids, it's quite a task. So for parents, for educators, for older siblings, for peer leaders, for any authority figure who is working with learners, and as you said, of any age, even if you're trying to be an autodidact and teach yourself, we have to know the person on the other side of this. We have to understand who's the learner, what makes them tick, what makes them motivated, what makes them kind of light up, because it probably isn't algebra. Or it might not be chemistry. There's a good chance that learning how to form a proper thesis statement is not this child's passion. Well, how do you bring that passionate side to the table so that they can really put their best foot forward as they're receiving and learning these messages and then putting forth whatever it is they've learned back out into the world? It's a difficult task to be attuned to these learners in the moment and to find a way to really reach them and keep them engaged. But to me, that's really the kind of secret sauce of teaching, is to reach them by seeing them, and then to keep that going as their changes are ever present.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that children are more disconnected today in their education than ever before?
What do you mean by disconnected?
Disconnected in the sense of, I don't need this.
So it's hard for me to say than ever before. That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this for 20 years.
Okay. Well, let's put a cap on it. Let's say the first normalized school was in 1849, 1851, depending on where you're looking at Massachusetts, right? So normalized school did, Board of Education was 1901 or something like that. So let's say 1950, like from there, that's when education really started to change.
So the past 75 years, not only have children changed, the country, the world has changed. There's a lot of features that have made the way that kids interact with education go through these evolutions. It's tough to kind of parse out what is the cause and what is the effect. Obviously, the answer is it's probably a host of reasons why things have changed as much as they have. I do think that what's lost is a collective sense of meaning, a universal understanding of purpose. I think that in earlier times of education, there was, and this is conjecture, I don't know this for a fact, but just kind of based on the way that American culture seems to have evolved, there was more of a collective understanding that kids were meant to go to school because that's what they did, period. And you do what you do. Adults, they're meant to work, and parents are meant to raise their kids, and kids go to school, and you try your best. And I feel like as the country changed and as culture changed, questioning institutions, questioning authority in general, questioning the nature of objective reality, and really just questioning what a lot of people would just consider common sense became more frequently done by people of all ages. And as the technological world has advanced, kids now are really poking holes in basically everything you can imagine. So in terms of being disconnected, I would say that there's more of a commonality amongst children being skeptical and really not believing that there's a purpose or a meaning behind their educational pursuits. Grades seem like keys that they can get a hold of to open doors, and the notion of learning something seems to be lost. They swing from one vine of achievement to the next vine of achievement without actually landing anywhere. And the purpose of high school is to get into college. The purpose of college is to get into maybe a finishing school or to get a degree so you can get a job. I'll ask 12-year-olds, why do you go to school? Like, what's the point? What's the purpose? Why do you think this is happening? 5 days a week, 8 hours a day for the first 18, 22 years of life. Why do you go? The answer I get most frequently is, so I don't become homeless. This is what a 12-year-old says. And I'm like, you really think that the school that exists and the homework that you're getting, the assignments that you do, that's the purpose to prevent you from being homeless? And they're going straight to the finish line, worst case scenario. But what they're not talking about is learning content, learning skills, gaining, and I'm going to use the word common again, a common understanding of what is. Some people refer to this as an epistemic crisis, that young people are having a tough time knowing how to know, knowing what is true. And I do feel like that has increased amongst young people, maybe since the 60s and 70s, for a variety of reasons, forcing them, causing them, leading them to being disconnected. So it's tough to put a finger on exactly what we might refer to it as, because I think it varies depending on the age group, depending on the part of the country we might be in. But here we are in 2025 with AI floating all around us, social media floating all around us. Kids know more about this stuff than adults do. It's a very complicated, confusing time for children. And disconnected is a fair word to apply to them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mark Twain said, "Do not allow your child's schooling to get in the way of their education." And it rings true ever more today. Like, like that quote, that saying is just paramount today still, because we'll put them in the schools, we'll give them a curriculum. And basically the curriculum is just a cookie cutter approach for what they need to understand in this grade. So by the time they are done with this grade, guess what? They should know this. But if they don't, well, were they a problem child? Going back to the behavior stuff that we talked about, how that can be so difficult. And just having a classroom with behavioral issues can drastically shorten most of those children, because now they are not getting an education. They're literally just having playtime, or the teacher's in survival mode. So now, if that child goes home and, they're sitting at the table with their parents and the parent asks, "Hey, what do you learn today?" The kid is not going to know what they learned. And oftentimes there's no association with what they're learning or what they're being taught to what they need to know. So it's like, do I need to know this? Yeah, they might know their, basic math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Yeah, that's a given. But then we can look at reading levels. It's almost like those are at an all-time low. In America is a country that spends a lot of money on education. And we have to ask, well, if America is spending all this money, all the taxpayer money is going to education, why are kids not the smartest or the best educated? We could look at countries like New Zealand. They have a phenomenal education program, and they do really good with teachers. They have a lot of support for the kids, and the kids are I'm not saying they're better by any metric, but if we can just look at how they're learning and how effective the schooling is there versus here, it's almost like when we throw them in school, it's like we put them in a jail cell. And there's many people who talk about how schools are so iconic to a jail. It's dark, the lighting, and not much windows. There might be bars on the windows. So it's almost like, like they're going into this place where their mind can't be free, where they can't elevate themselves. And I believe when you have someone who can look at the individual student, they can say, okay, let's look at what needs to be done versus, all right, well, this is what we need to know as a group. Because maybe that person is so far ahead, now they're kind of taking a back seat until they can finally catch up, but then all that time is wasted. Or maybe that child is just left behind because they can't keep up with the group, because they need individualized attention. And there's just so many issues that go on with the curriculum and the cookie cutter approach and the behavior in the classrooms and things like that. And, tutoring, as you said, with the one-on-one aspect can be one of the solutions for many parents to say, hey, my kid is struggling, or I want my kid to make sure that they're getting a good education rather than just going to school, because I understand what school is for some parents. Parents have to work a 9 to 5, maybe, right? They have to put their kids somewhere. And if they have to pay for schooling or daycare or some type of service, that can be more money out of their pockets to provide for the house, mortgage, electricity, water, etc. So they might not have it. So they say the best alternative for me is to put them in school. But then if that is the case for them, should they supplement with extra things like tutoring or coaching if their schools don't have any sports programs?
Yeah. So these are all great points. It's tricky. If nobody on Earth got tutored, then I don't think that we would feel a need for it. But once one person got that, and then somebody else was like, hey, that's not fair. Like, Billy, he's got this person who comes over to his house once a week and like helps him with the stuff he doesn't understand. How come I don't have that? Well, now Billy has a leg up and everybody else is now handicapped compared to that kid. And now somebody else is going to get it. And now it's, all the kids over there have it, but none of the kids over here have it. Of course, those scores are going to go up. So now it's just kind of this fight. And in my mind, the word tutor is actually kind of a confusing word because it gets defined in different ways. Some people view a tutor as somebody who basically just helps with homework, helps to get grades up. And in other situations, a tutor might be somebody who really helps you get ready for a test, a standardized test, to help you get into the next school, test prep coaching, however you might want to frame it. That has a whole different stigma attached to it. And then there's specialized skill building tutors who are not thinking about the kids' grades in the classroom or their homework. They're not thinking about an admissions test because the kid might not have one coming up. It's just about helping the student get better at something and improve in some capacity that is often dictated by the parents. It's rare, not impossible, but rare that a student is going to say, hey, mom, can you get me some extra work here to do to help me get better at writing or math or whatever it is? But it does happen. In my mind, if we have the ability to, in some way, help subsidize this situation. And this was a question that was posed to me a lot during COVID, as education was really kind of in the balance for a while. What do we do? How do we fix this? How do we bounce back? And as you said, test scores in America are embarrassing. Tutoring does seem to be a fair answer because kids need one-on-one help. And I think post-COVID, one of the things I noticed most prominently is that the range of student ability and interest has broadened. What used to be considered a standard fourth grade reading level is now much more diverse. And that's just, for example, that goes all the way up through high school. And it's not just about content, and it's not even about just abilities. It's also just about functionality. Some students don't know how to raise their hand in class and contribute to a conversation, how to take notes, how to make a study guide. I have plenty of students who are doing pre-calc who understand derivatives, but they don't know north, south, east, and west. They don't know their parents' cell phone number. They don't know the continents. There's a dearth of, and I keep on going back to this commonality idea, but there's a dearth of universal appreciation for knowledge as information has become premium. And what a tutor can often do is help turn information into knowledge and optimally help convert that knowledge into wisdom. And this is something that gets lost in schools because who has the time to make kids wise in schools? You're just kind of trying to keep them alive till 3 p.m., let alone get them to graduate. Making them wise seems like some science fiction, what are we like, training wizards? Like what does wisdom have to do with kids in school? But isn't that really the goal for an 18-year-old to enter either college or the workforce feeling like a capable, competent, functional young adult? And doesn't that often require not just information and not just knowledge, but how to apply it, which is optimally what wisdom would look like? How do we use these ideas? And to me, that's what a really good one-on-one educational experience can really foster, is not just memorize these facts, not just understand these terms, as you said, not just get through the curriculum, but okay, now you know this stuff. What are you going to do with it? You learned all about ancient China. So what are you going to do with that? You know how to balance chemistry equations. Cool. What can you do with that? And not just the literal abilities to do those tasks or to spit out these facts, but perhaps with the skills that were necessary in order to learn them. What can you do with those skills? How can you benefit yourself and your community and society as a whole now that you know these things? This is stuff that doesn't get touched on in school because, again, who has the time? It's really a challenge. So I do believe that if tutors are doing their job, and if somehow students and families are able to access tutors who are doing their job, it would be a mighty benefit.
And if we look at the curriculum, just very quickly, most of those people who are creating the curriculum are politicians, not educators. So they're not people who are at, the front of the battleground saying, okay, let's figure out what needs to know. Yeah, they can look at the test scores. Yes, they can look at maybe their past, something like that. Maybe they have some education background. But to that is, even for me, like when I was still a teacher, you look at the, like the board of ed there, and the teachers or the people who are running it are all like ex-principals or former principals, and maybe teachers that have been out of the profession 10, 15, 20 years. And let me tell you something. Yes, you have the background, but education changes so quickly and, in that time span. Now, it's not so much that what schools are going to be in 10 years, because there's a study, there's a gentleman, he created the book or wrote the book, Weapons of Mass Instruction. And in the book, he talked about how he was hired to basically predict what schooling would be like in a decade from that time. And then he did it 2 times. So in 9, I think he did the first one, 2010, he's like, it's going to be the same. And sure enough, he was just about correct. Only thing that was different, there was more standardized testing. And then the same thing in 2020. So he was able to predict what would go on because of the structure of how the politicians typically think when it comes to children and education. But now we have this factor of technology where there's a cell phone or a laptop, and there's just so much information that this child can be, presented. And now they're faced with the realization of, well, I don't need to learn this because I can go to Google. I can ask Google for anything. I'm sure you probably remember growing up, teachers said you will never have a calculator in your pocket all the time. And sure enough, here we are today. We have a calculator in our pocket all the time. But, it's one of those things of now they're seeing, well, if technology is moving so rapidly and it could do so many different things, and we can even look at the college of how many people are using AI to write their papers and AI to write their books and things like that. Like now that critical thinking, the common sense, the passion, or maybe just even the, what's the word I want to say? It's like vigor, but I guess passion, like to say, hey, I created this versus I gave something a prompt to create something for me. So they feel like it's their own, but it's not truly their own, of course. It's a program. So now they see how things are going and things can be done for them. It has affect the work ethic. The newer generations, they want to work 4 hours instead of 8 hours or something along those lines. Going back to what you said, they don't want to be poor, but then they're having this poor mindset of they have to get a 9-to-5 job, and they find themselves in a rat race long term. Schools don't teach financial literacy. They don't teach accounting. They don't teach home ec anymore, things like that. And if your school does, you're one of the few schools that have those programs still there, because public schools will cut things so quick. They will give you a standardized test in place of it and say, well, this is what they need. And they truly don't look at the individual child. They just look at, well, the test scores are down. They need more tests. And that doesn't make sense to me, because if the test scores are down, let's figure out how we can look at the child, if you want to give them more tests so they can increase the test rather than just giving more tests. And many of those students who take those tests, they click A, B, whatever, writing whatever. I see it happen. And it basically is because they check themselves out. Maybe they have family problems at the house. There's just, there could be a whole array of things that could be going on in their mind. And schooling and education and testing is not one of them. So it doesn't matter how many tests we give them or how many resources we give them. It's almost like they have to have that fire within them to say, I want to be better than where I am right now. Is there something that we can do as parents or educators to instill that into more children so they are not relying on technology or relying on this idea of the future is going to be different? So why learn about things today when things are going to be different tomorrow?
It's a great question. So there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
I love how a lot of this does always come back to purpose and meaning, because so much of what we wonder, how can we reach kids? How can we make a difference? How can we improve education? It does seem like an unanswerable question. And like there's some ineffable quality about children and bestowing knowledge upon them in a productive way that we just can't put our finger on. And what's tricky is that the notion of meaning and purpose is kind of an ineffable concept. It's this nebulous notion of how do you make somebody care about something? And I do feel that that's the answer. The goal of most educators primarily isn't just to teach content and isn't just to prepare kids to join the workforce when they become adults. It's to provide them with an understanding of why they're doing any of this. And if we're trying to increase incentive, increase motivation, increase resilience and grit and drive, passion, they're all going to be asking, well, what's the point? Why am I doing this? That is kind of a modern perspective that young people have. But it's, in my mind, an understandable one, considering that they have a lot of access to seeing what goes on behind the scenes nowadays. They see what other educational systems are like. They have a clear vision of where how the sausage is made in a lot of ways, where a lot of this goes, where the money's coming from. As you said about politicians and curriculum, the kids know what's going on. They know that it's not just about what's quote unquote good for them, but it's being devised in the state capitol by somebody who doesn't even think about what's good for them. They're just thinking about how to get reelected, and they just say the right thing. So reaching a kid and having them know that if they're learning math or if they're learning anything that really could be done by some sort of artificial intelligence, the purpose of them learning it isn't so that they necessarily know how to do that. It's so that they know how to learn. When I think about elementary school versus middle school versus high school, I think about elementary school really being a place where kids learn good habits and they pick up instincts that wouldn't just occur to them if they were not in school, but they develop habits that are going to be useful to them as they go through the rest of their childhoods and eventually into their adulthood. Middle school, you take those habits and then you learn how to learn, because it doesn't just happen automatically. Sure, we as humans do have the capacity for gaining an understanding through repetition, and we see models show us what's going on. But to be a really effective, high quality learner takes guidance and takes practice. And to me, that's what middle school is all about. And then in high school, you get to put that to use. And you say, okay, I've developed these habits. I know how to learn. Let's see if I can handle some tough stuff. Let's see if I can do some high level foreign languages or some difficult science or some really hard abstract math that I'm not necessarily going to quote unquote use in my life, but learning is something I'm going to use in my life. So a lot of my students will ask me, why do I have to learn this? And I'll say, look, man, like if you're going to be dating some girl when you're 26 and you're going to have lunch with her dad and he's going to start talking to you about Belgium and what the financial world is like because he used to live there, don't you want to be able to understand what he's saying and maybe read a quick article and talk to him about it? Like, isn't there some concept in your head about being good at learning that matters? Let's practice that in the school. A lot of what school is practice for developing these skills and building these muscles. I've had students who want to be artists, want to be dancers, want to be athletes, and they're just completely bored silly learning math, reading, or writing. And they're saying, this is going to have nothing to do with my life. I know for a fact. I know what's going on. I'm applying to art colleges. I'm going to get scholarships. I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to be a dancer. And I say, well, you know what dancers think about all the time? Physiology. Their body is their tool. So they have to understand muscles and nutrition. And you don't just all of a sudden know that because you're good at dancing. You have to learn. So when you're 25 and it's time to really get good at learning about nutrition or physiology, wouldn't it be nice to be good at learning? Let's get good at that in school. Once this clicks with a kid, it's not automatic, it's not easy. But once they do have an internalized understanding and appreciation for this, well, then suddenly doing homework feels like it has a purpose. Suddenly studying for a test feels like it has a purpose beyond getting a good grade or getting your mom off your case or getting into a college. Those are important. Sticks and carrots are useful, but it's not going to get a kid to really try their absolute hardest, and at least not consistently. Internalized incentive really does make a difference. And having a child understand why learning at their age is actually useful is vital. I mean, we talk about artificial intelligence. The word intelligence sounds really shiny and nice there. It's artificial intelligence. We still need humans with actual intelligence to make this world go. It's not just going to be the old people doing it while the young people get to be YouTubers. Eventually, the YouTubers need to be the ones running things. They got to know some stuff. It's not just going to be a society of people going, hey guys, look at my shoes. Like that's not going to be how we run as a world. So kids do understand this if it's provided to them in a context that's going to really resonate with them. It's just rare that, first of all, that they have the opportunity to have these conversations with adults. Second of all, it's rare that the adults really break it down this way because most of the adults don't have the time or the energy. They're going to say, do your homework because I told you to. I got stuff to do. So it's a challenge for everyone, but I do think it's one that we can overcome with patience and with understanding towards one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And definitely the work that you are doing is bridging that challenge of, parents and children and learning to love what they're learning with purpose rather than just an obedience to do something. And it's something that I'm not sure if they just fall into. I think it's something they have to be made aware of. Typically, this happens when you get a really good teacher. The teacher can say, hey, learning is fun. Let's have fun today. Let's not make it miserable. And sometimes you just get the teacher that's kind of checked out maybe or something like that. And if you think about it, a teacher is with you for 10 months. So you have 10 months of this static of just like this no fun person who's ready for retirement, has tenure, they don't have to do much, just barely make it by. And the kids know, right? They're extremely intelligent and intuitive to someone's emotional state. So they can look at the teacher as like, oh, this person doesn't care. This person is not enthusiastic. And I remember when I started teaching and I was young, I was 23 or something like that and started. And I was going in, I'm a young guy, right? So relatable, things along those lines, but also fact that I cared, the fact that I was excited to come in each and every day, and they can tell it's like night and day. And the reason I know, because one day I didn't feel good. I had a flu. I don't know what was going on with me. I just like felt terrible. And I went to the office. I said, hey, I think I have to go home. And they're like, well, if you go home, there's going to be no classes for the kids. And I was like, I can't do that to them. So the first class was like, let me get 50%, right? 50%. This is a kindergarten class. Sure enough, kindergarten class can read me like a book. They're like, this guy's not 100% today. And the class was terrible. And I'm talking about this is a class that's always good. So I was like, you know what I have to do? I have to give 100%, whether I want to or not. And sure enough, I gave 100% going forward that day. No more issues. And I felt better at the end of the day, right? But as soon as I went home, I just passed out. I was so exhausted. But it's something that, a child is going to be paying attention to, where they're like, I'm looking at this adult and I'm looking at their life, and I'm going to choose if I want to listen to this individual. Because if you are someone who doesn't look like them, if you are someone who doesn't maybe drive a car that they would like to drive, it's almost like, why should I listen to you? And I think there's that stigma, especially in America culture, is like, if you want to be like someone, you need to find that mentor, find that person, and then emulate them. So that's why kids will go, watch football or basketball or Taylor Swift or something along those lines. And they say, I want to be that. And they don't necessarily look at all the work necessary to get it. And just a quick tidbit, I was coaching a kid. He was 15, 16 at the time. He said he wanted to be a soccer player like Ronaldo. I said, okay, well, figure out what Ronaldo does for training, and I want you to triple it. Right. So he figured out what Ronaldo does, and he's like, OK, great. I know what I have to do. Next week, I said, OK, tell me, about your progress in this training. He's like, oh, I was so busy. I didn't have any time. I was like, OK, you're 15, 16. You don't have time for the dream that you have. Then where are we going? Right. Because you're going to find yourself struggling because you don't want to take action. So there has to be action in education also, because if we just kind of say, I'm in 7th grade now, I'm in 8th grade now, I'm just kind of moving along the conveyor belt to adulthood. And then eventually they find themselves at the intersection. Do they join the military? Do they go to college? Or do they stay in their parents' house? So they have to make a choice. And sometimes they're going to face some failure. They're going to face some hardship. But if they have given themselves this mindset that they can learn, that they can enhance themselves, it's going to be so much more beneficial to them long term, rather than I'm just this person that I am today. Many of the students, they fall into them circumstances rather than saying, I would like to define my circumstance. What is the main benefit to working with you and your company that a child can look at, not only today getting the education, but long-term at their purpose in their future?
That's a great question. So connected to what you were just saying, one of the things that I'm really adamant about when I'm training staff members is for them to recognize that effort is a skill. It's one that can be taught. It's one that can be practiced. It's one that can be enhanced. And a lot of times the word lazy gets thrown around by parents. And they'll just tell me, oh, my kid's lazy. And the kid's like 9. And I'm like, all right, so that's just like a permanent condition that we're just stamping on that kid's forehead. They're lazy. So therefore, anything that we can squeeze out of them is kind of like a bonus, a miracle. Okay, let's just accept that as a fact. I recognize that people have inherently different energy levels. One kid's motor might be different than another kid's. I was raised in New York City, and my heroes were the New York Knicks. Madison Square Garden was like my second home. I was lucky enough to go to a bunch of games in the 1980s when tickets cost like $9.50. And my gosh, would 20,000 New Yorkers let the players know if they didn't think that they were trying hard enough? I grew up understanding what it meant to try. And the Knicks were not good in the 80s, but they were heroes to the city if they were trying hard. And that became kind of the calling card of New York basketball. I played a lot of basketball when I was younger. Overall, was you have grit, you have determination, you give it what you've got. If you win, if you lose, you're going to get applause if you tried your hardest. And that isn't a notion that necessarily resonates with most kids, because kids see grades as the standard. So if you tried, but you got a C, what was the point? And a lot of kids feel like, okay, so I tried and got a C, so I'm just not going to try next time, because what did that get me? And if students are looking at school as what's meant to be a path towards perfection, they get taught practice makes perfect. They get warned that things aren't going to be easy, so maybe they shouldn't even try. This is just a phrase that we use in society and culture. We say, oh, well, it's not going to be easy. So maybe don't. It's not supposed to be easy. Easy means requiring little to no effort. What is really intended to be easy that's worthwhile? The notion of easy come, easy go, I talk to my students about that phrase quite a lot. Some of them recognize it as a lyric from Bohemian Rhapsody, but it's really a pretty profound idea that something that you acquire easily, easy come, is probably going to go just as easily, easy go. In order for something to stick, for us to either care enough to hold on to it, or for it to just become a part of our everyday lives, we probably had to work pretty hard to attain. So we teach that effort is a skill, and we make sure that our students aren't just learning the content, but they're learning the ability to try hard and to apply themselves. And it's more than just put in X amount of hours. It's really a mindset. I mean, this comes up with standardized test taking quite a bit as well. Parents will ask me, how do you make my kid make fewer careless mistakes? They make so many careless mistakes. And what do teachers do in that situation? They say, double check your work, underline keywords, go more slowly. This isn't going to land with every kid. And a lot of them, when they take these tests, can't go more slowly. They don't have time to underline things. They can't check their work. So I break down the word careful. Careful doesn't mean cautious. Careful means you're full of care. It's not a mental thing. It's not a cerebral thing. You have to care about what you're doing. It needs to matter. So while you're taking this test, if you're just afraid of getting things wrong, that doesn't mean that it matters to you. You're acting out of fear. But if you want to do your best, because it matters to you to do your best, period, you're going to try your hardest. That's your job. That's your responsibility. Your responsibility isn't to get an A. Your responsibility isn't to get into this school. You can't always control that stuff. What a kid can control is how hard they try, no matter what. So I want them to be the guy on the Knicks who's taking a charge, who's diving out of bounds, who's giving it all they've got. If they win or they lose, if they're on the Knicks or if they're on the Oklahoma City Thunder, whoever they are, their job is to try their best. And we're going to get them to a point where they're going to know how to do that, know why they should do that, and where they get an opportunity to practice doing that.
Like I said early on, education is one of my passions. So I love to have conversations about education with the guests, especially if they're in that field, because it is so important to be paying attention to that. And as a parent myself, I understand that I can't do everything, even with my background. I know I can't do it by myself. So down the road, my kid is going to get coaches. They're going to get tutors. They're going to get people besides me, because I remember there was a father when I was a swim coach back in college time. And he said, Michael, do you think I really don't know how to swim? And I go, I think you know how to swim. And he goes, exactly. But then he said, there's going to come a time when you're going to realize that there's things that dad can do, and there's things mom can do, and there's things that dad and mom can't do. And so you supplement it, you get some help. And I think this is where true education is so powerful, where we look at, well, I might not be the best at math or reading or something along those lines. So why in the world am I going to be teaching my kid that? Let me find someone who's passionate about that. Because as I said early on, right, when I didn't want to give 100%, it's not that I didn't want to. It's just that I thought I can get away with it. Find someone who's going to say, hey, I'm passionate about this. And it kind of rubs off on them. I think about the movie, I forget the Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, right? He came into the class with the love of literature and poems and reading and writing. And then the students fell into that love too. Versus someone who kind of says, okay, well, this is next on the curriculum. This is next on the docket. Let's learn that. There's not much passion there. It's just, again, it's that rudimentary thing of what is next. And I think the work that you're doing, Jesse, is so powerful, because you're not just the cookie cutter or, person who's doing the approach of, well, everyone is doing it, you should do it too. Let's look at what you will like. What is your purpose? What is your passion? And then let's start to build on that so we can get to the higher level of learning and education. So as we begin to wrap up, Jesse, I would love to get some final words from you, and then to also please tell the audience where they can find you.
Sure. I appreciate all the kind words. Just for full transparency, I don't I don't love test prep. I don't like school, really. Like homework isn't fun, but I do love connecting with young learners. And I do love providing kids with certain outlooks, certain perspectives and understandings about how to just make their school life a little bit more comfortable. As you said, in general, school sucks for most kids and they're still going to go. How can we make it a little bit better? And how can we make it a little bit more meaningful for them, more worthwhile? So I do have a passion for that. Reading comp, I could take it or leave it. So yeah, the company is Hartman Tutoring, Hartman. You can find us at hartmantutoring.com. And we have social media accounts that I don't update ever, but feel free to check them out. Hartman Tutoring all over the place. Yeah.
Perfect. All those links would be right down in the description box below. Force him to go on his social medias to post some things. I understand social media could be a drag sometimes. It takes away so much time and it's it's definitely not my cup of tea either. So that's why I get other people to do my social medias because it's just easier that way.
Mm-hmm.
I keep my sanity and I get to do what I love. And I think what you love is to educate, to teach children, not so much as you said about the test. I don't like tests. I don't like giving grades. I remember the first year I had to give grades. I was like, this is terrible, not only for me, but for the kids, because the kids are coming to me saying, hey, why do I got to be or something like that? And I'm like, well, the reason you got to be is because this is what is expected of you. And this is what you can do right now. And I had to explain it to the parents. And it's a mess where everything is, I need an A. I need that picture perfect grade because it's going to give me the picture perfect life. And I don't think that. There was a CEO, I forget the company, he's over in Asia. He billionaire, right? He has a son and he says, son, you don't have to worry about getting an A or B as long as you get a C, right? I'm good with that. Because if you're spending all your time getting these A's and B's and things like that, you're going to get confused in what you truly want to do because you're just so focused in the books and learning and not understanding that life is more than just a book. Life is more than just a subject or something along those lines. Like he goes into detail, but basically he was saying that there's something that you have to learn. And the best way to do it is to experience so many more things. So he basically gave permission to his son saying, it's okay to get a C. You don't have to get an A. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. So then now that son, wherever he is today, I'm sure he's light years apart from his cohorts who are just stuck on the A. I didn't get an A. I didn't get a B. We can look at the mental illness in America. Even that, 50% of adults today are going to be struggling with that, and it all stems from grades, from social pressures and norms. I mean, there's just a plethora of issues, but with issues comes solution. And so we have to figure out what solutions that we can implement, not only to get our children through, but to get them into a new understanding and a new mindset that is not about just surviving, but thriving. So I do want to thank you, Jesse, for coming on, spending some time talking about your work, and then also just being that beacon and that lighthouse for many students who are maybe on that path to greatness, but they just don't know it yet.
I appreciate having me. Thanks so much. It was a good time.